Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you here for this special discussion on maximizing instructional time and how effective edtech solutions improve classroom efficiency. Okay, so without further ado, let's meet our panelists. First, I'm Grace Lee, and I will be moderating today. I'm the head of design for Logitech's education team, and I work closely with educators, students, IT managers, and schools to gain in depth insights and create meaningful product solutions that better the educational experience. I worked really closely on the Logitech Zone Learn, which is our first made for students education headset. I'm wearing them right now. And we were able to do so by working really closely with students and teachers like yourself. And it was really one of my proudest moments in my career. I'll pass it off to Sarah to introduce herself.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Radcliffe. I'm the Director of Future Ready Learning in the School District of Altoona. A lot of people wonder what a Director of Future Ready Learning does. I oversee IT, virtual learning, college and career readiness, CTE, and library in my district. So, quite a variety of things that I oversee. This is my 8th year in a role like this, my 4th year in Altoona. Before I was a technology leader, I was a technology coach. And prior to that, I was a speech and language pathologist. So I've had my fingers in assistive technology and technology to support learning for quite some time, and am excited to unveil some of the research that was found today and talk through some problems of practice and solutions that we found in Altoona.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. How about you, Parker?
Yeah, thanks, Grace, for having me. And hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. My name is Parker Van Ostrand. I'm the project director for product certifications at Digital Promise. We're a global nonprofit working at the intersection of research, practice, and technology in education. My background is as an English language arts teacher at a bilingual middle school, and then I moved into edtech operations for a little bit before finding myself in the nonprofit world, still working in education. And in my role, I work to create and award certifications for education technology. Most products that we've certified have been software, edtech software, but I believe Logitech was actually the first hardware product that we certified, and there have been a number of Logitech products that we've certified since the first one. So it's exciting to be here, and looking forward to hearing some great questions and chatting with everyone.
Awesome. And so thank you all for joining us. We're so happy to have you. And so let's dive in. And so to kick it off, did you know that 30 hours of instructional time is lost to distraction during a typical school year? So this is just one of the many findings from the research that we conducted this summer. Logitech partnered with the EdWeek Research Center to administer an online survey of June of 2024. And this survey attracted 591 US teachers and school-based tech directors who work with students in grades 3rd through 12th. And this research quantifies and explores two different types of time loss that the right edtech can help address, which is repetition and troubleshooting and repairs. And so, really, we're very excited to share these key findings throughout today's discussion. So, one of the key findings from our research found that hearing and vision challenges are cutting into instructional time. So, 97% of teachers in grades 3rd to 12th say that they stop instruction at least twice a day to repeat information students did not hear the first time. And 89% say that they pause at least twice a day to repeat demonstrations students did not see the first time. So, our first question is, what is your initial reaction to these results? Are you seeing these types of challenges in your school or district? And let's start with Sarah.
All right, I wasn't surprised to see those findings because I know that there are a number of distractions in the daily interactions with teachers and their students. Um, as far as the hearing distractions, I one might think right away that that's related to actual hearing loss, but it really is related to, attention and focus and the background noise of a school. I took a audio meter around in our school and measured the noise level in certain areas of the school at different times of the day. Of course, the lunchroom's really loud, but you'd be surprised to know that the classrooms, even when there wasn't a lot happening, had a lot of background noise. One of the things that we've done in our school district is to install phonak systems in the classroom so teachers have voice amplification. We used to use those just for students with hearing impairments, but now we use them in every classroom. Um, Teachers say that they repeat directions a lot less. Students are getting the amplified speech sounds of their teachers in the classroom so they can better attend to instruction and instructions. But also, teachers have had the added benefit of saving their voice. Teachers report that at the end of the day, they have less vocal fatigue and less fatigue overall because we've been able to leverage a tool to help us overcome some of those background noises and increase the ability of the students to pay attention to what the teachers are talking about.
That's great. That's a really helpful product recommendation. I remember we did some research. We put a microphone in the class and we had the same realization. So, helping a teacher from voice strain is super important. We love to hear from you, Parker.
Yeah, so while I don't work in a school or in a district, we co-design all of our certifications with district leaders and with educators. So I hear firsthand all about their experiences, both their challenges and also their successes with education technology, and the needs and priorities that comes along with that as well. And so when I hear this data, this research, it makes me think about how we are really reaching students. And it makes me think about how there's a huge opportunity for edtech to provide multiple means of representation so teachers and students can access content, materials, lessons plans in ways that really make sense for them. And it's so important to reach students in a way that makes sense to them. And while learning styles is largely a myth, we do still need to provide multiple ways of engaging them, so we're not losing time trying to reach students in a way that is just not going to reach them. And of course, there's the importance of accessibility in all of this as well. And we're really seeing an increase in state laws on focusing on the accessibility of devices and ed tech. So like Maryland and Colorado, for example, are setting certain requirements for web content accessibility guidelines that all products that are used in schools need to meet to be able to be used in those states.
Yeah, it's really great to hear that there's like a much more heightened need for accessibility solutions, and it's interesting to hear that there is an increase in laws around and guidelines around this. Great. So thanks for those insightful points. We know that repetition can be a good teaching tool, but it's, like you said, it's not really helpful for everyone. Some students just don't get that much out of it, as we know. And so, ed tech that's designed to make the most of teaching can really boost what teachers do best. And we're just making sure that repeating stuff in class is a choice and not just because students are missing it the first time. Great. Let's move on to our next point. Um, so EdTech has the potential to restore learning time not only by making instruction more audible and visible, but by making devices easier for students to use for seat work and testing and other classroom tasks. But devices can also present challenges and cause disruptions. So when asked to identify the technology-related disruptions they would want to eliminate from their day, 26% of educators pointed to problems with their devices, such as glitching, uncharged or broken devices. So, with this data point in mind, how can schools choose tools that minimize disruptions and ensure technology is supporting rather than hindering instructional time? Um, let's start with you, Parker.
Yeah, I think you need to start from a place of really having a clear understanding of how this technology is meant to support learning goals. You can't just introduce a new piece of tech and be like, all right, we're just going to see what happens. Students are going to use it. Teachers are going to use it. We think it has the opportunity to help, and we're just going to go from there. That's not going to be helpful for anyone. Technology is not going to be useful in the classroom, and it's going to be disruptive, and it's going to be unclear what its purpose is. So it's really important that when you are intentionally selecting technology, you're looking at the bigger picture of what your district or your school's learning goals are for your students. And edtech is really like one piece of that puzzle. EdTech is not going to be the one size fits all solution that's going to solve everything, but really it needs to be intentionally integrated in the larger processes to ensure that our students have the best chance of reaching their learning goals, that you know better than anyone else as being part of their community what those important learning goals are. This is really going to help educators get the most out of their tool. And we also advocate that schools pilot new technology in a way that really elevates student and teacher voices. We want to make sure that the technology that's being used is resonating with students in our classrooms and the teachers who are using them. And so it's better to pilot a product for a shorter period of time and then get feedback from your teachers and from your students before, fully committing to a much lengthier contract or something like that, where you're going to have less opportunity to really figure out how this tool is best going to integrate into your learning landscape.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're relating it back to like the larger goals of your district or and I also really love the prototyping element of your strategy. It's really important to just test and learn and pilot, like you said, especially with the people who are going to be using this day to day. So that's great. Um, I'd love to hear from you, Sarah.
Yeah, Parker, we use some prototyping or piloting in our district as well to try out hardware and software, get a feel for it. And I know that when we have done that in the past, we've had much better luck with implementing a tool that we've purchased in the long run. We also work internally on our strategies for having well-run processes for repairs and getting loaners when, especially when we're talking about hardware. We know that devices being in the hands of kids means that they're going to get broken sometimes. They're going to get jostled around. I like to hear from places like Logitech that are doing research on how to make things more sustainable in the classroom. So that is great as well. But we work on trying to make sure that the exchange process for another device or repair of the device or hardware that students are using is really quick and easy. Some of the pitfalls that we try to avoid are just buying extra devices to have in the classroom. That seems like a good answer at first, but what happens is that the one piece gets broken and there will be an extra one in the classroom. No one tells anyone that that one is broken because they have an extra. And so the broken one doesn't get repaired in a timely fashion. So we find that exchanging devices in the library for us works really well because then the IT team is aware that something needs repair and can get it back into the classroom in a functioning order. We do always have loaners or extras of things in the library, but then they're checked out to help us manage that inventory of devices and know what is in good repair and what is not in good repair. One of the strategies that we've tried in the past couple of years is a Chromebook repair tower. And the tower houses Chromebooks. Students go and they get a ticket for their Chromebook by filling in what's wrong with it. They put it into the tower and exchange it for a loaner device that's in good working order. We come and collect those devices from the IT department. We repair them. We put them back in the tower and email the student. So the student can come and just collect their repaired, fixed device that's ready to go in very little time. This helps us with avoiding lines in the library and letting our librarians and library paras be working on other things besides just technology devices, which can become kind of an overwhelming problem as well.
Yeah, that is a really great recommendation of being prepared when things do break while not overspending on backups. Because I can really imagine that if you just kind of rely on these like backups, like you can get very much like it might create bad habits, right? Disorganization and what you're saying about like you don't actually like log into things that break. So yeah, I think that's really great input for attendees that might be dealing with the same challenges. Great. Let's move on to our next question. And as a reminder, please put your Q&As in the chat for those of you who are tuned in. Okay, our question 3 is how can schools assess whether their current technology is aiding or hindering student learning? Let's start with you, Parker, again.
Yeah, I think here it's really, really important to go right to the source. Talk to students, talk to teachers, talk to librarians, people who have that firsthand experience with how the technology is actually being used in the classroom, and creating safe and open spaces for those conversations to happen, maybe even that kind of feedback to happen anonymously. And I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier about really coming up with a very clear plan about what learning purpose this technology is supposed to support and what goals you have for the technology. And if you have these goals and this learning purpose in mind, it's going to help contextualize the feedback that you're getting about a product, about technology that's being used in your classroom. If you just ask, oh, how often are you using this? And the answer that you get from your teachers is 5 minutes a day, maybe that doesn't sound like it's getting that much use, and you might be wondering, is this really something we want to continue using? Is this something that's worth the time and effort we put into using this tool? But if you tie that back to what that original learning purpose was, what the original intention was, maybe you had determined earlier on that you want multiple light touches with a piece of technology, and that's the kind of purpose that it's going to best serve your students and your goals for your students. And so actually that piece of feedback about, we only use it 5 minutes a day, maybe that's actually using it exactly as how you envisioned it would intentionally support student learning. So it's important that the feedback that you get from educators, from learners, from anyone who's coming in contact with the tech that you're using is contextualized with what you think its purpose is for your learners and for those who are using the product technology. I also think it's important that you develop a relationship with the supplier, with the vendor, the provider. And when you have a relationship with them, and it's a very open relationship, and you can not just share what you're hearing about your experiences from your learners, from your educators with them, but a great product or a great tool will have a way for educators or users to create tickets or share feedback, somehow get information about their usage back to the provider who's actually developed this technology. And if you're able to have that relationship with the provider, you can potentially go to them and say, hey, what kinds of usage are you seeing? What kinds of tickets or feedback are you getting from users in my district or in my school? And having that really clear line of communication is going to get a really good picture about the usage of your product and how it may be aiding or hindering student learning in your school or in your district.
I really, really, I love what you said so much about really talking to the people who are using these products day to day. And um, even just with our research and especially when we talk to students who use our products, like I'm always amazed and surprised by how acute and honest the type of feedback we get are, especially like little kids. They're really not afraid to be brutally honest. If they don't like something, they'll tell you right to your face. So yeah, I think the feedback is just it's important to have the relationship and the feedback. So, you know, um, uh, edtech suppliers like ourselves and Logitech, we can make the right products that are super helpful for, um, the educational goals that schools and districts have set up. Great. Okay, let's go to you, Sarah. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I like what Parker said about getting feedback. And I know that as a technology leader, I'm pretty good about getting input from teachers when we're selecting a tool or selecting a piece of software to utilize in the school district. But sometimes what's a little bit easier to forget once you start implementing something and you're just kind of rolling with it is to get usage feedback. Like, how's it going now? So I like what Parker was saying about that, just checking back in with our practitioners to see how things landed. Was it what we thought it was going to be? So that's really good advice. Looking at our own internal data and internal tracking systems is also something that I've utilized to help with this, to make sure that things that we're doing definitely aren't hindering student learning, but also are aiding in student learning. We have a high quality tech ticketing tool in our school district. And so we use that for tech tickets, but we're able to look at the data and utilize it to track what are we fixing a lot? What are things that people even features of things that people are requesting or asking about that maybe we could help them to incorporate or to make sure that they know how to utilize. That helps us also with our professional development offerings to teachers, to making sure that they can fully leverage a tool to help students learn as well. I found that it's nearly impossible to draw a direct correlation between hardware or software and student learning outcomes. Um, but we do leverage the dashboards in software that show us how students are interacting, how much they're interacting, and what they might be learning from the software. And I think getting feedback from the teachers is very important. I also think that there is an element of learning that we maybe don't focus on a lot, but um, it's wonderful when technology tools can assist with academic learning in the classroom. That's what we're looking for. But we also have to remember that we're preparing kids for the world of 2025. So sometimes interacting with a technology device is the learning that we want them to achieve. So not kind of overlooking that piece as well. What kinds of digital literacy skills are students engaging in and learning by working with a piece of hardware or software? So I think those are some important aspects to kind of balance out when you're working in a school and you have to figure out if something that you're doing is worth the investment.
Yeah, that's a really great points. I really love the data-driven approach. I hear that it might not always be possible, so communication really is crucial. But that's also a type of data as well, right? It's qualitative. So no, that's great. So, well, now that we've discussed how to identify technology that is aiding student learning, let's move on and chat about how to ensure students have access to those tools. So, another key finding shows that 85% of survey respondents say that hardware accessories such as headphones, styluses, and mice can increase instructional time by making devices like Chromebooks, iPads, tablets, or laptops easier for students to use. Yet, less than half of teachers and tech directors report that all of their students have access to functioning hardware accessories during class. So, knowing the impact hardware accessories have in the classroom, what would you say to districts to help them understand the benefit of equipping all students with the necessary hardware accessories and to prioritize making this happen? Let's start with Parker.
Yeah, this is a really important question. And everyone here on the panel and the audience knows that every instructional minute is such a precious resource. There's a limited amount of time in the school day. Teachers have a lot of students who they're working with. So there's a very limited number of minutes that they're able to work with either individual students or groups of students. And wasting any of this time is going to be a huge block to accessing the kinds of learning and collaboration that technology can be really amazing for and supportive of. So it's really important that educator buy-in is a central piece of this puzzle. Educators have so much on their plates already, and when they hear that something new is going to be added or put into the mix, that can be really stressful. It can be scary. I mean, I know from my own time as a teacher, like being asked to do additional things on top of everything that I was already doing, like was not a great feeling all the time. So it's important that there's buy-in from educators about how this new technology is going to be used and implemented. And that means that to start with, you need to understand what your teachers and your learners' pain points are and what their hurdles are, and need to make sure that the technology that you're using and integrating is directly addressing those pain points and making sure that it's communicated to learners, to students, how this technology is going to directly, or we intend that this technology is going to directly support the students' learning and the educators' instruction. And on top of that, to get buy-in, there's a lot of fear and anxiety around new technology. Like AI. I know there's a lot of questions about like, how is AI impacting my teaching and how is AI impacting my students' learning? And so to get that buy-in from educators about integrating new technology, it's important that the teachers in your classrooms and your students too understand that their use of this technology, especially at the beginning, is not going to make or break anything about their life, their job security, their salary. Them effectively integrating this tool is not tied to the work that they can do in those ways. And it's important that there's a grace period for everyone involved, admin and IT who are helping implement new technology, educators who are really like making that connection between the new tech and learners who are using this tech for the first time to understand like, okay, we might not get it exactly right the first time, but we have room to like figure out how to best integrate this technology into our existing learning needs. And that's going to help educators and learners feel much more secure about their ability to use new technology. And they're going to buy in, be more bought in, and be more excited to use technology when they can view it from that way. And new tech is not going to end up just like collecting dust on a shelf. And it's important too that once the technology is integrated into the learning space, that educators are continually supported in how they can learn how to evolve their use of the product, whether that's through professional learning or professional development opportunities. Educators always say they want more professional development. When it comes time to doing it, it can be a challenge because they have so much time on their plate. But they have so many things on their plate and not enough time to do all of that. But having that opportunity there, those resources there for them when they are looking for that support is really, really crucial for them to feel like, yes, they can integrate this new technology well, and it is going to benefit their students. The last thing that I'll say on this question is that, at Digital Promise with our certifications, we really advocate for schools to use and procure tools whose claims about their research basis or their efficacy have been looked at and been validated by third parties. And you're not just taking, an edtech company at their word for what their product can or can't do. And so one of our certifications is the Practitioner Informed Design product certification, which certifies tools that have demonstrated that they continually use educator feedback educator feedback in their development and iteration of the tool. And this is going to mean that if you use a tool that has been certified with this or similar certifications, that you can feel more confident that your tool is used and appreciated and loved by real educators, and that real educators' needs do make a very real impact on how that ed tech company designs and evolves the tools that they develop.
Great, Parker. Thank you for making this last point. It really is the approach that we take at Logitech. So building things with teachers, it really ensures that we're making the right products that they will use, and we're just not building tech for tech's sake, right? Okay, love to hear from you, Sarah.
I think internally in a school district, it's also important to think about where the funding will come from for certain types of devices and how those devices will be used. So, thinking ahead and planning ahead to make sure that your budgeting process is the most effective that it can be for any tools that are needed can be very helpful as well. And communicating with other leadership about who is budgeting for what, to make sure that when it comes down to it, somebody has budgeted for the items that are needed in the classroom. Those are kind of some of the, I think, simple foundational things to think about. But one of the key parts of this question is about making sure that all students have access to the materials, the different hardware and software. And that's super important to me, because if we graduate students who some of them have had access to these technology tools and some haven't, then it's not going to be a successful thing out in the community as students are leaving school. So making sure that every student has access to the same set of tools, I think, is very important. When we're talking about one-to-one devices or accessories for those devices, ensuring that classrooms are equipped and classroom teachers are equipped to know what to do with those devices and how to use them. I think is also important. So I am a strong proponent of equity of access to the technology tools because I think it's important in every job position, every community aspect outside of school that people have the technology tools and the practice to be able to engage with them. So, looking at how to make sure that every child has access to the tools that are offered by the school, I think is super important.
Yeah, that's really great perspective, Sarah. I'm sure it's a really delicate dance, like what you're talking about with ensuring cost effectiveness and budgets, but also making sure that everyone has had the fair chance and everyone has had that accessibility to the tools that they deserve. Great. So it's now time for our final question. How are you or how have you seen districts optimizing efficiency and instructional time? Let's start with Sarah.
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit previously. One of the challenges that we've had to overcome is getting replacement devices to students as soon as possible. In the beginning, I've always kind of worked in a library exchange kind of scenario, but in the beginning, sometimes our librarian would take 10 minutes to try to repair a device, and I'm like, no, if you can't do it in 2 minutes or less, give them a loaner and send them back to class. I want to make sure that students are missing as little instructional time as possible. So we've really coached our library staff on, really quick troubleshooting is fine if you can get their device back into their hands. But for the most part, we really need to do a little bit of troubleshooting. And if we can't figure it out in 2 minutes or less, get them a device to take back to class with them. One of the ways that we have also shortened repair time is to have our own students be repairing the Chromebooks in our system. So we have student interns that learn how to repair devices and they fix the devices. So they're not leaving our district to get repaired and then come back, which makes things a lot more efficient for us in our setup and the size of our district. Our priority in trying to optimize anything as far as technology and technology repairs is to keep students engaged in their learning and avoid missing instructional time any chance that we can get.
Oh yeah, great point. And it seems really intense. It's almost like a race car pit stop just to like fix something in 2 minutes and get it out there. But yes, definitely hear you that it's hugely crucial to reduce downtime, which can hugely impact engagement and student learning. Okay. Love to hear from you, Parker.
Yeah. So I'm going to start by kind of touching on a very common theme that I've been saying throughout all of this in my answers. But since this is the last question, I do feel it's appropriate to bring it full circle. In that making sure that each tool you bring into your district or into your schools has a very clear learning objective for how it's going to be used to support your larger learning goals. Like I said before, one edtech tool is not going to be like a magic solution that solves everything. There needs to be an intentional vision about how technology fits into how your school or how your district supports student learning holistically. And that's going to ensure that edtech really finds its right place in your district. You're not asking it to do too much, but you're also not asking it to do too little. You want to maximize all the different amazing things that a piece of technology can do. So really examining how it fits into the broader learning landscape is really critical for making sure that you're efficient with that technology. And I want to, Sarah, in your previous answer, you said a phrase that I wrote down because it was just like so perfectly encapsulated so much, equity of access. I really love that phrase because it makes me think of the importance of kind of like codifying across a district, across the school system, how how you envision what your vision for technology is, and making sure that there's consistency across every classroom, across every school site, across every location, and so that educators in your system know what to expect from technology, learners know what to expect from your technology, parents who are interacting with, edtech in one way or another, whether that's because devices are being brought home or they're using software to interact with their students, with their child's teachers or their child's work. Really codifying your vision and your policies for edtech usage is going to be really critical here, because again, Sarah, I love that example of like, if it's not going to be fixed in a few minutes, we've got to figure out what that alternate solution is, and really being able to like write those processes and write those systems down and have that be consistent across every learner, every educator, every staff member is going to make sure that you're getting the most out of the most out of the edtech that you're using in your schools.
I also think that doing that, Parker, writing things down, making sure that you're visiting locations where these exchanges are happening, it eliminates confusion. If there's confusion about what to do with a broken device, then we sometimes don't get it fixed. If there's confusion about who can help troubleshoot, then we often don't get it fixed. And one thing that I wanted to bring up as far as equity of access and ensuring that students have access is the teacher plays a very important role in that equity of access. We can have devices in all of the places, but if we're not working alongside teachers to teach them how to leverage those tools, then there's not equity of skill building in the classrooms. And so that's something that's really important in Altoona as well. We've started to develop what digital literacy skills should all kindergartners know, should all first graders know, just like we do with math and the other subjects. And I think that's hugely important, because it's not really like a if you build it, they will come kind of situation here. You can have devices out in all of the classrooms, but if teachers are not aware of how to leverage those for learning, then they won't get utilized the same way across your system.
Yeah, and to add on to that as well, I think there are a lot of assumptions about how people know to use technology that aren't necessarily true. I mean, I remember I had typing lessons growing up, how to use a keyboard, and I learned how to type. My own students, when I taught, they didn't have typing lessons. They didn't know how to use a keyboard. They didn't know how to use, a QWERTY keyboard on a digital display, and their learning suffered because of that. And so we can't just assume that educators, learners will know how to use technology in a certain way. But we need to be really intentional with that learning pathway. So when Sarah, you said like, we have certain goals for kindergartners, first graders, second graders, that's so important. I agree.
I love that. Thank you for bringing it full circle. These are all great points. I think that we're getting a bunch of Q&A. I mean, I think this spurred a lot of questions. And so let's move on to Q&A. Okay, so the first question is, do you have any advice for gaining teacher buy-in to use these tools?
Yeah, I don't mind if you don't mind, Parker. I can jump in here and you can add anything as well. I think Parker and I both brought up some points today about engaging teachers for feedback, engaging stakeholders in determining what devices and what software is a best fit for your classroom. I can tell you about a time where this didn't go well for me and what I learned from it. When I started in Altoona, we had, it was just kind of rolling into post COVID. So I started in 21, 22, and we had all kinds of free tools. Software companies were offering free tools during COVID. So we had a variety of web learning programs available, which were free, but then they weren't free anymore. So we had to determine like, where are we going to spend our money? And I asked via like a survey what people's preferences were based on what we already had. I didn't know the process that was used to determine what tools we had to start with. And people essentially kind of voted for the one they liked the best. And we kept that one. And then there was a lot of distress the next year about how this wasn't the tool that people wanted. And I was very confused about that because my survey results showed me that's the tool they wanted. But what I needed to do is start back at the drawing board and ask teachers, what do they want to get out of a tool? They were picking kind of the least of a set of tools that they weren't impressed with. And maybe this one was the best one of some not great tools. So once we went back to the drawing board and we really looked at what do teachers want to get out of a web learning tool? How do they want to utilize it in the classroom? Where will it be supportive? And in the past, when I've done that, I've kind of put together a stakeholder group based on, a teacher from this grade level and a teacher from this school. In this case, I invited all teachers to participate because I needed to have as many voices around the table as I possibly could to give input on what decision to make. And when we did that, we landed on a tool that people really love and that is getting a lot more use than our tools had been before. And we're seeing that we're seeing achievement data increase inside that tool because teachers are utilizing it in the way that is suggested by the provider. So for me, even though I had asked them kind of what they wanted, I wasn't asking the right questions. And I think getting meaningful input from teachers, bringing them around the table and having a discussion about what they're looking for, that has a huge value in getting buy-in.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Sarah. And I touched a little bit on buy-in already, but what I'll add is that it's really important that teachers don't see new technology as an additional thing to understand and learn on top of the stack of everything else they need to do, but rather make sure that if you're the one selecting EdTech for your district or for your school, that you're really critically evaluating how is this fitting into the curriculum that we already have? How is this fitting into the pedagogy that we're already supporting our teachers to use? If you're a school that is really, really big on project-based learning and there's a tool that's going to support with that, great. Use that tool. Show teachers how that supports with project-based learning. If your school that doesn't really do that, they're like, oh, our neighboring district does PBL and they use this tool and it seems really cool and their teachers really like it. And then you procure that and hand it to your teachers, but you don't really do PBL in the curriculum that much. That's just going to be an added burden, and that's not going to be something that's going to support with teacher buy-in. So on the other hand, would want to look at, okay, what kinds of curricula do we have? How do we already support our teachers to be effective educators and to connect with their students? And then think, all right, what technology is going to support them best with that? And we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're supporting things that teachers are already doing so they can hit the ground running to learn how to integrate new technology while also giving them that, that space that I talked about before to experiment a little bit and try things out for the first time without that stress of like, oh, I need to get this right on the very first day or my admin's not going to be happy.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Our second question in Q&A is, are there guidelines to help determine what types of tools are ideal by grade level or even subject?
So I'm not sure about tools. I can tell you that when we were looking at digital literacy skills, again, we got all of our teachers together. We gave them a pile of skills on a big long list, and we said, we want you to rate these skills based on whether you think that students in your grade could do this skill, whether you already teach them this skill, or if you need them to come into your grade level already knowing that skill. And we had each grade level get together and rate the skills that way. And then we built our scope and sequence out of that. So now we just look for tools where students would have the opportunity to practice the skills that are kind of our essential skills in technology for those grade levels. I think, again, if you're looking for software tools or hardware tools, teachers can give you a lot of input on what things are not only appropriate but also would be helpful in their grade levels.
Yeah, hearing from teachers, who are on the ground every day and are such experts in an area like this is going to be really crucial. I agree, Sarah. And I would also connect back to what I said earlier about piloting or prototyping a tool. If you know, like, hey, we're going to try this out, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. We haven't invested thousands of dollars per student, per click or per touch or whatever. Giving yourself that freedom, that flexibility to try something out. And if it doesn't work, if it's not right for you, you haven't invested too much that now you feel like, oh, well, we have to stick with this product, even though it doesn't feel totally age aligned or grade aligned, or isn't even content or subject that we necessarily want. So, I would say that EdTech providers, they'll make certain claims about what age level or grade level is right for their tool. And I think for the most part, they know what they're talking about because the good tools will have tested that out and really thought critically about that. But you might find that in your district, it's a little bit different from what you thought you were going to get. But if you build in that piloting period, that testing out period, you're going to feel like you're in a place to say, okay, you know what? This was not right for us, but we have an idea, a better idea now about what kind of tool is right for us.
Those are great points. Our third question is when selecting and implementing edtech solutions, how can districts create systems to collect and act on student and teacher feedback?
You want me to go first, Parker?
Sure.
Okay. Here's what I've used in the past. We first start with if we're trying to find a tool in a certain area, we without thinking about any names of tools or things we've used before, we think about what do we want that tool to do for us? What do we want to get out of it? And then I usually kind of go to sort of a mini RFP to send it out and say, we're looking for a tool that does these things. And I invite vendors to come in and to present, usually virtually, about how their tool fits the needs that our teachers have. We've had really good success with that because vendors know their tools really well and they know the things that they are good at. And they might name some things, well, our tool doesn't do this, but it does do this, this, and this, which might be something we hadn't thought of before. So we start there. And when we have our list of things that we want our tool to do, then when we listen to the vendor presentations, we sort of like grade them on how well the product does what we're looking for. We then kind of either look at if there might be a clear winner sometimes from that process, and then we move forward with that. If there are a couple that are very close, we talk about the benefits and drawbacks of each one. So I'm getting input from the beginning in that way. And then we select a tool and we roll out an implementation plan. When I'm seeking feedback for something that we maybe already have to determine if it's still meeting the needs of our teachers, sometimes if I learn about a new tool that I think would meet their needs better, I do two things. This is what's worked well in my district. I think every district's different for how you might roll this out, but this is what I've found works well for me. I do a survey just using Google Forms and ask a variety of questions. And I try to make sure that I have some questions in there that are sort of checklist or multiple choice, and then some places for teachers to just kind of write what they think, because sometimes I don't ask the right questions. And when they can write what they think, then I find out what I was missing. And I take that input and that feedback and I kind of sort through it. The next set of things that I do after that, people can fill in the survey if they want to. They can do both. I'll hold listening sessions. So I take the feedback that I've gotten and I hold the listening session and I invite the teachers to come around. And I just tell them, here's the feedback that I have gotten so far. Here are the themes that I'm hearing. What do you think of that? And they can either add new information, they can comment on the themes that we're finding so far. But I find that good balance. Some people just want to fill out a survey and be done with it. Some people just want to come to a listening session because they have things that they want to make sure that I know. So I do both things and kind of balance out the feedback from both of those areas to determine if something that we already have is working well or not.
Definitely echo all of the answers Sarah just shared, and would like to add on to as well. If you're doing something like a survey, like Sarah's mentioning, don't just do one at the end of the year. Do something at the beginning of the year so you understand where your teachers are at to begin with. Do something similar in the middle of the year to understand how it's going. Do something at the end of the year to understand better how it has gone. And when you're collecting points of feedback along the way, and not just kind of once at the end, it's gonna do two things. It's gonna show your teachers that you really care about their insights and their experiences, and that you're actually dedicated to better understanding that. And it's also going to better contextualize and triangulate all this data that you're getting if you're being able to examine it across time and at different stages of the product's lifestyle, the technology's life cycle for its use within your classrooms or districts. And I would also say keep an open mind if you're potentially approached by an edtech developer or a researcher working in learning in the learning sciences saying, hey, we want to do a study. We're looking for participants. We would love your involvement if you're able to do that. Because I think there's a lot more research needed about education technology and how it can benefit students. So anyone who can help contribute to that is a hero in my books. But also, if you're worried about if we participate in this study, we're going to have to spend time developing relationships or connections with the edtech developers and with the researchers, and then we're going to have to show our educators how to use a new tool, and that's a lot of extra work. It is more work, but it's also more work every time you're picking new tools and going through an RFP process or developing relationships with customer success managers and then teaching your teachers how to use new tools. That work is already happening. So you might as well partner with researchers who are going to do a lot of the work for you in analyzing the results of the data that you collect about how the edtech is being implemented, how it is supporting student learning, how it's supporting educator instruction. And you could get a lot out of it. I know edtech developers, researchers are always looking for more participants in education research. And this could be a really good opportunity to build in mechanisms for feedback and better understanding how technology is being used to support student learning in your schools.
That's both really great perspective. And I also just love that you gave really simple and tactical ways, just like send out a Google survey. It's like it's not hard and anyone can do it. So thank you. So we have another buy-in question, but more specific to admin buy-in. Do you have any advice for teachers who need admin buy-in?
Yeah, I've been on that side of the coin as well, especially when I was a technology coach. I feel like I was always going to bat for teachers on what we should buy and what cool new tools that I have found or come across. I think what's important is to most administrators would want to know what problem are you trying to solve with something that you want to purchase. So everything has balance, and we know school district budgets are finite. So what problem are you trying to solve with this? And maybe if you have information about what other tools are available in the district and why they don't solve that problem, I think that would be an important thing. I also think it's helpful to talk to your colleagues that would be teaching the same content or teaching in the same area or grade level to understand their perspectives as well. If you want something in your school district, that might be one thing, but if your whole department would benefit from a certain tool or your whole grade level or your whole building, I think that's a different thing and kind of raises the radar a little bit for administrators. So I think going with what problem you're trying to solve and how this tool might solve that problem, and then getting some feedback or information from your colleagues that might also utilize that tool could be a good start.
I love that the person who asked this question flipped how we were approaching this topic. So that's a really useful perspective to ask about. So thank you for asking in this way. And I would say, as if you're a teacher looking for admin buy-in, of course, you as a teacher know what is going to work in your classroom with your students best, and you have great ideas about what kinds of technology can support you with that. But you also want, some backup on these ideas that you have. And district leaders want to know, before they are committing to procuring a specific piece of education technology, there are so many things that they are looking at. They want to see, is this going to be interoperable with the other technology that we have in our schools or in our districts? They want to know if it's, what accessibility is like or what research basis is like, because oftentimes there can be funding tied to accessibility. There can be funding tied to whether an edtech tool has demonstrated a research basis. So if you use, there are lots of validators out there. EdTech is one of them. Digital Promise is one EdTech validator. We have our product certifications. ISTE has EdTech validations. There's the Project Unicorn data interoperability certification. There are lots of certifications out there that EdTech products and Logitech products have earned, that if you can go to your admin and say, hey, I saw that this tool is research-based, it's interoperable, it's accessible, and you've done that legwork for your admin, that's going to go a long way in helping them feel like, okay, this is actually a tool that really could work for our district.
Great. So I think we have time for one more question. So someone asked, some of the arguments I get from elementary teachers is that they need to master the basic skills like reading and writing without technology. They don't want to use technology until upper grades. What would you say to educators who follow this approach?
I think there needs to be a balance. And I get where they're coming from, and I don't completely disagree. And I think there just needs to be a balance between um, when technology is used and focusing on some of the other skills. I push back a little bit sometimes on teachers who say this, because I don't know about in other areas of the country, but in my region, the day before Christmas break is not a day where a whole lot of learning happens. And could that be a day that we leverage utilizing some technology tools versus having popcorn and a movie? Something like that. So I try to think about what would be some engaging things that kids could do on some of those days where you're trying to wrap up something, and you might not be doing some new learning, you might not be doing graded learning, but bringing in some little robots or something and doing some programming with those, doing VR headsets, things like that. That gets kids engaged in technology, but it's not taking away from something like literacy instruction for that day. So sometimes I try to bring up times where maybe we have time and we could do that without sacrificing literacy instruction or math instruction.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I'll just very, very quickly add, technology is going to be part of a student's life from now until for the rest of their life. And so figuring out where we can start helping them learn how technology best serves their learning as young as we can, even if just in a very small way, is going to go a long way in giving them the building blocks for digital literacy.
Thank you so much, Parker and Sarah. So, just as a final wrap up, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. Stay in touch with Logitech for Education at www.logitech.com/education. And thanks so much for your time today. And lovely to have you both, Parker and Sarah.